between the regime and some in the Christian community as well. So that clearly exists and is somewhat of a complicating factor as well. There are particular threat from Islamic groups. And my question would be, what has the administration been doing about that? What should we be doing? One quote in the article was, the ethno-religious cleansing taking place could soon see Syria emptied of Christians, for example. And apparently it hasn't been getting a tremendous amount of coverage in the media overall compared to a lot of other things. Ms. Lindberg, would you want to touch on that particular issue?
Yes, thank you for your question. I mean, I think this underscores the fragmentation that's happening in Syria and the ways in which so many particular groups are being targeted and threatened. We provide humanitarian assistance on the basis of need, regardless of who you are. We are seeking to get into all the 14 governance. Many of the Christian communities are concentrated in what's called the Christian Valley between Homs and Tartus and Aleppo, and we are definitely ensuring that assistance is getting there through our partners, as well as in a few pockets in the suburbs of Damascus. This is something that we're definitely watching, along with all the groups that are particularly vulnerable.
Thank you. Either one of the other witnesses want to touch on this, or Ambassador?
Yeah. Congressman, a couple of things I'd like to emphasize. First, I was in Iraq for almost 5 years, and I saw what happened to the Iraqi Christian community. It was terrible. And even now, they're still often under threat, those who remain. So I'm very sensitive to that. And the administration is very, very sensitive to that. A couple of things just want to highlight. First, we are deeply concerned about the threat of Islamist extremists within the Syrian opposition. That is why the administration designated the Nusra Front in December 2012 as an affiliate of the Al-Qaeda organization in Iraq. And we did that specifically to warn others in the Syrian opposition of the risks that they take by working with a Nusra Front. And I'm encouraged, Congressman, that there have been instances now where other Syrians who want a tolerant society, other Syrians who believe that all Syrians should be treated equally without respect to their religion or their ethnicity, are starting to push back in some instances against a Nusra on the ground. But there is a great deal of concern. Second thing, I just want to assure you, I mentioned I have met people from the Free Syrian Army, from the Supreme Military Command, and we have highlighted the worries of minority groups, Alawis and Christians, so that not that we are against the Sunni majority of Syria, we are not, but the minorities are nervous and their rights must be protected and respected. And we hear good things from them. And I can tell you, for example, that they have met Christian leaders from some of the communities in Syria and have told us afterwards that their meetings were positive, and we have to keep pushing in that direction. We are anxious to provide them the capabilities to pursue people in this way.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the role of Russia? They seem to be coy. I know they're supportive, and they, yesterday I think the ambassador said that the people who first used chemical were the rebels. Can you talk a little bit about the usual coyness?
Congressman, we saw the Russian statement that the rebels, Free Syrian Army yesterday used chemical weapons. And I just want to say we have no evidence to corroborate that, and we're very skeptical of it. We'll look at it, but our initial impression is we're very skeptical. With respect to the Russian position, they say that they are not attached to Bashar al-Assad, and they say they would accept a transition governing body. They signed up to the Geneva framework that I have talked about. However, we would like Russia to go far, far beyond that. We would like Russia, first of all, to stop delivering arms systems to the Syrian government, and this is an ongoing conversation that we have with them. We would also like the Russians to join the rest of the international community in the very tight economic sanctions regime which we have developed with the Europeans, with countries in the Middle East, with the Japanese and other countries, we would welcome the Russians joining that, all with the goal of getting to a sustainable political solution.
And can you talk about the issue of branding a little bit? It seems that we can't put our name on some of the food or whatever material that we deliver to Syria for our various concerns. How would they know that we are the ones assisting them?
Yeah.
know-
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Congressman, I'm happy to share a little bit. I would encourage Assistant Administrator Lindbergh to talk about this, since it's more her people and her programs. But we understand the utility of Syrians seeing $385 million in American assistance going in to help Syrians in need. We are the largest bilateral donor. And there are some places where we have been able to do branding, but in other places there are security issues. And Nancy, do you want to say more?
Yeah, I would just simply add that we evaluate this every day and look at every opportunity to see where we can brand safely. Ultimately, we need to provide assistance in a way that ensures that it gets to the people and that we are able to save lives in this really, really difficult crisis. If we do so in a way that further endangers the aid workers, it threatens not only our very brave colleagues, but it also will shut down the overall enterprise. So it's a delicate balance, and as a result, we're also looking at all the other ways to get the word out, all the other ways to communicate directly to the Syrian people that the American people are standing with them.
To be very brief, Congressman, I personally don't agree that we waited so long. I was on the ground there. We were helping democracy activists when I was in Syria in 2011, and we were doing a lot to help them.
What was the reason for withholding at that time lethal aid?
Congressman, for a long time, Syrians themselves didn't want outside interference in their uprising, what they called the revolution. For a long time, through 2011, the Syrians themselves wanted their demonstrations to be peaceful. They did not want foreign armed intervention. In fact, they were bitterly criticizing Hezbollah and Iran for their intervention.
Respectfully, and I understand that. I'm talking about, I guess, when it went to a shooting war. And again, I'm saying this, I'm literally trying to figure this out because I don't know the answer today. I mean, this is a difficult quandary. Let me ask another question. When we talk about the red line and we talk about the use of chemical weapons, I know this has been hammered, especially by the chairman. We're going to find out what happened. It's just a matter of time. We're going to find out if chemical weapons were used, who used them. And I feel like we have, a red line is supposed to be exactly that, a red line, a point you don't cross. I heard what I assume the president was saying was, if you use chemical weapons, that is the red line. Now I hear that there's kind of a shifting red line to, no, we're talking about the transfer of chemical weapons and not necessarily using them against your own people. So it seems like a cyan line or a yellow line. I think my mind of a red line is to make it very clear. If you use chemical weapons against your people, we will devastate your ability to use chemical weapons against your people. And the result of that will be a deep, deep thinking about whether we'll use chemical weapons against our own people because we know our ability to do so will be devastated. Let me ask you just one or two more questions here. How does Russia and Iran specifically see our policy in Syria? Are they frightened of our involvement of Syria because it'll affect their interest? Or are they happy with kind of our situation in Syria right now and kind of the approach we're taking, Mr. Ambassador?
Congressman, I'm not the spokesman for the Russian or Iranian foreign ministry.
Well, but you probably have a gut feeling.
But let me just say a couple of things. First, the very nature of the Iranian actions in Syria now suggests to me that they're very nervous about the Assad regime's long-term prospects. They are plussing up their assistants, are plussing up their people on the ground, they're plussing up what they're sending in. That doesn't sound like a confident stance to me. That sounds like they're nervous, and they ought to be nervous. I mentioned before about how the military balance has shifted strongly against the regime in a war of attrition.
Is it a nervousness because of the situation on the ground or because of specifically what we're doing? I'm asking, are we helping that nervousness or are we just kind of not?
Absolutely, we help that nervousness, Congressman. Let me give you an example. A lot of this war is being fought on video.
Right.
And much of the equipment that provides the YouTube videos that you see, that I see, that actually comes from us.
Good.
We are the ones that are helping the opposition both get information from the outside world through the internet and also to upload stuff back to the rest of planet Earth. For example, the chairman in his opening remarks talked about the devastation to the city of Homs.
Right.
We have worked very closely with the Homs Provincial Revolution Council to make sure they can stay in touch with Planet Earth Congress.
Well, thank you, and again, I do appreciate your service. One thing I want to add, though, and as I close, I hope that this is not an extension of what was made famous a few years ago, the lead from behind strategy. I think when America retreats from the world, I think chaos ensues, and so I hope this is an extension of that. I'm not saying it is, but that's something I wanted to say. Thank you all for your service, and I yield back.
Bradley Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for joining us here today. Ambassador Ford, I'll turn to you again. Initially, as you stated, our goals currently are to see the Assad regime leave as soon as possible, to have a negotiated settlement, retaining Syria's national unity, and fostering an emergence of a new Syrian government that enhances rather than lessens security within Syria and around the region. As we look at that and we're developing our strategy, what events or trends or other developments might be indications that our desired or stated objectives aren't achievable? And if we start to see those, what are our best alternatives if national unity isn't achievable?
We worry, Congressman, about the collapse of the state. And I don't mean the government of Bashar al-Assad. We think he's going to go in any case, sooner or later. But the collapse of the state institutions, we've seen that in other places, including in the Middle East, and we do not want to see the Syrian government disappear. The institutions of state, the judiciary, a police force that is able to maintain law and order, banks, financial systems, etc. So infrastructure, electricity. Where we see that degrading further, that would be a sign that things are going even worse. Will create more refugee flows, will help extremists. And that is why we are increasing our assistance to these areas which have been liberated from government control and where state institutions, frankly, are failing. And so we are directly now helping local administrative councils, which have been set up by the Syrian revolution. We will work very closely with Prime Minister Hassan Hito to funnel assistance into these local councils so that they can prevent the full collapse of state institutions. I think that is our biggest concern in terms of maintaining unity and keeping Syria from being an operating base for terrorist extremists, helping maintain security. That's the main thing.
But if unity is not achieved or achievable, what is our best alternative?
Congressman, I think today, March 20th, we can get to a solution that maintains the unity of Syria. The different groups in Syria represented in this coalition that I talked about all want to maintain Syria's unity. Even the people, the foot soldiers of Bashar al-Assad's ruthless army, are not calling for the division of the country. I don't think Syrians are looking to divide their state. And so we have to figure out a way to get a negotiated agreement where everyone feels safe within a unified Syria. It could be that the government is going to look entirely different from how this last government did. It certainly has to with respect to its treatment of citizens in terms of dignity and respect for human rights. But I can imagine lots of political scenarios where you can work out deals between the groups.
Okay. And taking it a little more regionally, we as was mentioned before, we have refugees. I'm looking up to the whole panel now. Refugees in Turkey, 200,000, 400,000, overwhelming in Jordan. We're seeing it in Lebanon. Long term, this becomes a not just a financial burden, but a political risk to these countries in the region, in the region as a whole. What do we need to make sure, and how can Congress help make sure that we do everything necessary so that that does not happen?
thank you for asking, Congressman. And what are our conversations with these neighboring countries? They have explained to us the strains and the burdens that this is putting on their societies. There are economic strains, and there are also sometimes tensions between the groups in those countries, like in Lebanon, for example. When we were talking before about Christians, I was thinking about how Christians and Muslims live together in Lebanon, but when you have these extra burdens put on a country, it can really provoke tensions among different communities. And so what Congress can do is continue to provide assistance so that we can support these countries. In some cases, such as Jordan, we have a bilateral assistance relationship. In the case of Lebanon, we really prefer to work through international organizations. And even in Turkey, we can do discrete things by providing assistance through non-governmental organizations, or have technical experts from the international organizations provide assistance, even though the Turks are very much in the lead of their own camps. I realize that asking for more money at this current time in this environment on Capitol Hill, I don't have to tell you that sort of goes against the grain, but that is the key way that we can convert our good intentions to real live aid and make a difference in people's lives on the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, folks on the panel, for your attendance and your testimony. Probably most of my questions will be addressed to Ambassador Ford. Thank you, sir. I'm wondering regarding the red line, and I know we've kind of kicked this horse a bit, but I want to get some specifics if I could, if you know them. What are the possible consequences? And I share your skepticism of the current reports, but let's say that they are true, or let's say they become true at some point. What are the range of possible consequences that the American people can expect from the administration as a response?
Congressman, I really do not want to speculate here about hypothetical situations. What I do want to underline is that the President has said there will be consequences, and that we will seek strongly that the people who use chemical weapons be held accountable. Exactly what those consequences would do today, I cannot speculate.
Have they been discussed? Have consequences been discussed that you know of?
I am very certain, Congressman, that they have been discussed. But again, I don't want to speculate on what the hypothetical possibilities are. I do not want to go there. I do want to underline how seriously we take the reports.
I appreciate that, but I think it is important for the world to know, for Congress to know, for Americans to know what we can expect to see at what point, so we can have that discussion, because if it happens, and when it happens, it will be very quick, and we don't want to be in a position of Monday morning quarterbacking after the fact and making sure we got it right. And I understand your reluctance to provide that information, but I think it's important for the American people to know. And I'm not talking about hypothetical situations. I mean, we have to have a plan, and we should know, with the caveat that there are certain security requirements, to know what those plans are, what those possibilities are. With that, what do we know? Do we know with any certainty what kind of WMDs, if that's what we're discussing, whether it's sarin gas or whether it's choking agents or blister agents, what are we talking about? Do we know?
The Syrian government has the largest stocks of chemical weapons of any country in the region, and it includes the things that you mentioned. So because we cannot yet state with certainty that chemical weapons have been used in the last days, I cannot tell you what happened. I can tell you that we have a large team of people working on it right now. And I understand your concerns about explaining to the American people, but I think first we need to understand what exactly has happened, if anything.
I would agree with you. However, I mean, right now we're looking at the anniversary of Iraq, and a lot of folks are questioning what happened there and why did we do that and what did we get out of it. And it's topical because we don't want to end up there again, and we should learn from those mistakes. And right now, I'm not sure that the American people have the confidence of what the plan is. Of course, not having no clue what the plan is, and we don't want the current administration to make the mistakes of any of the past administrations. With that, and with your characterization of the stockpiles that Syria has, look, I think the American people and I think the world kind of see two outcomes here. I mean, Assad has very little impetus to do anything but stay there. And if he leaves willingly, he's going to be tried for war crimes and spend his life in prison. And I think that's a fait accompli at this point. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I see. So I'm wondering what safeguards are being put in place regarding cross-border material transportation of the things that we've discussed.
We understand the risk you're talking about, Congressman, in terms of leakage of materials, which is why we have underlined to the Syrian authorities and to their friends that these materials have to stay in their sites and they have to stay secure.
And let me just clarify, the Syrian authorities you're talking about are the ones that are currently in power?
Correct. But I would also say, I mentioned that I have met General Idris, and we have also told him that we would view their using these kinds of weapons also as completely unacceptable.
But just one last question, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect. What safeguards, have you discussed any safeguards regarding border control of these agents, other than telling the current regime, don't do anything with them, don't move them? What are we doing proactively to make sure they don't end up in the wrong hands or on our shores or affecting our interests around the globe?
Congressman, they have the neighboring states, Iraq, Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. We have different kinds of bilateral programs with Iraq, with Jordan, with Lebanon. Certainly with Turkey, again, we have a regular conversation on the question of the Syrian chemical weapons stock and what is to be done about it. So what I can tell you here is that all of the countries are sensitive to the risks. We are looking to be helpful with them to address those risks, and each government is taking different responses according to its differing needs.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.